couple of quick items of housekeeping for everyone on the call. Yes, we encourage you to ask questions. You should have a question box on your control panel. We'll be keeping an eye on it. We have just started recording the webinar, so if for any reason you have to hop off, we're going to make it available afterwards so you don't miss anything. And there's a quick follow-up survey right when the webinar ends. We'd love to hear feedback from you and learn what we can do better or how we can deliver content that is worthwhile for you all. So before we get to our speakers, we want to make a few really important points. Why are we doing this webinar? And we're doing this webinar because this is an important point at which you all are at, an inflection point, and you're really starting on the next stage in your career, the next stage in your life. We want you to see Emma Bowen not just as a resource for getting an internship, which you've probably been with us for a while, but a resource for getting a job, a family, and an organization you're involved with throughout your career. And we want you to continue to see us that way. I know a lot of you have been in touch with Sandra, and she's been helping you in your job hunt. Please continue to make use of her. She has a number of fantastic, decades-long connections throughout the country and across the industry. So if you have a position you're interested in the media industry, especially with one of our partner companies, and you're looking at someone and you're in touch with an HR person, reach out to Sandra, utilize her as a resource. In general, we also have an alumni and media professionals network. It's called the AMP Network. You will all get an invitation. All seniors who graduate will get an invitation to that network. That's something we really encourage you to take part in. It's a unique resource that can connect you to new opportunities as you're established in your career. We also have a HireVue platform. Some of you may have utilized that with your partner companies or in other interviews. It's essentially a really easy video interviewing tool, and we're going to use that to share the talent that you all have with some of our partners for new jobs. So our graduating seniors should especially look out for that. And in a very general sense, we encourage you to continue to listen, continue to learn, put yourself out there as much as possible. That's what this stage is about. We are also lucky to be joined by our president and CEO, Dr. Rasan Harris, who has a few words of wisdom.
So good afternoon, good evening, everyone. A lot of information is coming at you at once, and it's probably going to take a little while for it to really sink in. So I really try to make sure that folks focus in on just remembering a few key things that unlock all the other information they need going forward. So the one thing that you need to recognize is that the Emma Bowen Foundation Fellowship, the internship program that you've been in, is more valuable than any other option that you could have taken for one reason. You're part of the Emma Bowen family for life. Being an Emma Bowen means that people recognize that you're high quality. They recognize that you understand the industry, and they understand that you should be sought after. You leave your Emma Bowen inheritance behind if you do not utilize us as a staff and you do not keep us abreast of what's going on in your job search. If you continue to use us now and continue to use us in the future, you will always be employed and employed at some of the best companies in the world if you engage us. Do not go through the 3 or 4 years you've been with the Emma Bowen Foundation and just drop off now because you thought it was only an internship. This is a network that you will be able to support you through finding new opportunities to talk about issues of how to advance yourself in your career and to continue to develop as a leader. So make sure that, again, if you remember nothing else, keeping in touch and keeping Ms. Rice apprised of what you have going on in your search, making sure that all of our partner companies know that you're available to work, and helping us position you in front of them is what you need to do. Exactly the specifics of what that looks like, we can figure out by talking to all the great resources that are on this call with us, and by talking to other staff. but we should be your go-to. And this is the difference between you going and having 1 year at Google, but then trying to figure out your own way, or 1 year at PricewaterhouseCoopers. Being a part of our network is something that you'll be able to carry along for life. And if you talk to some of our alumni, you'll recognize how they got to where they are by leaning on us as a network. So we're thankful that you're with us for this long, and we just want to make sure that you really cash in on your Emma Bowen inheritance so that you can get to where you need to in your career. So thanks so much, and really look forward to the continued conversations we're going to have and we're going to have with your colleagues to make sure that you're all hired.
Thank you, Rasan.
Thank you.
We just to hammer that point home, you might have a few other people who care about your job situation now. Obviously, you care about it, but we care. Maybe your mom cares, your family cares. We care as much as anyone. So make sure to capitalize on that. We will continue to care about you and about making sure you're going the right way in your career and helping you get a job. So use us as that resource. That's what we're here for.
And that means for your sponsor company, but also the other companies that are our partners. So do not be myopic and only think that you're playing to an audience of where you interned. This is for all the 50 companies that we have partnerships with. That's what your inheritance is.
Great. So you've heard enough from us already, I'm sure. We are happy to introduce Elaine Davidson and Reginald Jackson at Beacon Lane Consulting. They are consultants who are experts in talent acquisition and human resources. They've been around the field for a really long time, and they have a lot of expertise to share with you all today. Elaine is the founder and CEO of Beacon Lane. She's been in corporate America for a few decades. Reginald Jackson is the COO and a Marine Corps veteran. I'm sure we're going to learn more about their expertise and what they have to share. So without further ado, we'd love to hop in to their portion of the presentation. Hi, Elaine. Hi, Reginald.
Hello. Thank you for that intro. Appreciate it.
Hi, thanks.
Absolutely.
So, hi, everyone. This is Elaine. Really thrilled to be here and just to be part of this organization that is new to us, but really excited for what's to come over the next months and maybe hopefully years. So thanks for having us. We can actually flip to the first slide. And as we're getting into this, I just want to comment on two things I heard. One thing that, Rasan, you said around, there's a lot of information that will be thrown out to you today, and it could be confusing, it could be overwhelming. I'm sure you are all taking notes, but I would echo what I heard Rasan say. If you can walk away with even 2 or 3 really critical points that will help you, that's a good place to be. And you don't need to remember every single thing we tell you, but what you want to focus on are the 2 or 3 things that will really help you take the next step forward. So don't feel overwhelmed. The Emma Bowen team is here. We're here. There's a lot of resources for you. So if you don't digest all of it today, that's okay. We can always revisit it and answer whatever questions you have. So we're going to start. The way that we approach this conversation is a few minutes theoretical, and then we're really going to get into the more tactical. So bear with us for a few minutes while we talk about the theoretical, because this is important, and you'll come back to this as you are going through your job application process. So what you see in front of you is what we call it's one of our signature programs called Pivot 12, and we've pulled a little bit from our program to share with you our view around what it takes for students to convert from being a student to a professional. And while there are many attributes that we could focus on, the ones that we've chosen to focus on for many reasons, a lot of it based on our experience in the market, are the 5 that you see in front of you around professionalism, influence, values, open, and teaming. We'll go into those in a moment on the next slide. But what you see here in front of you in the cloud is really what I want to talk about for a moment. And I think it adds on to where Michael started the conversation around, you're at an interesting point in your lives and in your careers where you've gotten this far, you have a lot of foundational knowledge, and if we were standing together in a room right now, I'd probably ask you all to stand up and really just turn pivot left, right, the opposite direction, and realize that that's what this is. This is a moment where you're pivoting and you're turning from where you are just to shift into another position so that you are career ready. And I truly believe you wouldn't be where you are now if you didn't already have the foundational knowledge that you need to succeed. Our job here today and moving forward is to continue to teach you how to organize and leverage that information in a way that's going to help you land that job, that first job, that second job, and jobs to come after that, to Rasan's point that you're part of a family now that will be supportive of you throughout. So let's move to the next slide, where we will spend a few more minutes on the theoretical, and then we'll move into a little bit more of the tactical. So what you see in front of you is our framework for pivot. And the way that we talk about this is we look at the qualities, and then we talk about what it means on an individual level, and then what it means for you on an organizational level. I won't read through all of these. My hope is that you'll have access to this beyond today. But if we take a few examples, I want you to understand how this helps you as you are crafting your resume, crafting your the way that you're going to go into these interviews and answer questions and have a really good dialogue. So when we think about, for example, we think about professionalism, I would assume that words like ethical, timely, socially aware, honest would already come to mind for you. But when we think about it on an organizational level, I want you to stretch yourself and think about things like critical thinking and what that means in the professional environment. And in fact, critical thinking is probably one of the top competencies that interviewers look for during the interview process. So to be a professional, of course, is to be reliable, respect the structure, keep your mind focused on work when you're at work. But it goes beyond that, and it goes around being curious about the environment around you, curious about your subject matter, thinking critically and bringing those thoughts to the table. So as you're working on these things on an individual level, this is a good time for you to be thinking about, well, what does this mean for me as a professional? So let's take another one just as an example. One of my favorite ones is influence, and we talk a lot about communicating with impact and knowing your position, knowing your point of view, and having that point of view. Where I see a lot of professionals, and not just young professionals, really professionals at different stages of their career, where I see them struggle is at the organizational level around having a voice and bringing that voice to the table. So what I see often is people shying away from having a voice if they don't know if it's the popular idea or thought. And that's not really what you're being judged or assessed on. We don't even use the word judge, probably assessed. But what really people are looking for is a conversation, and that you could bring an idea to the table, whether it's the popular one or not, doesn't really matter, but having a voice and having a point of view. And if you're in the organization and if you're invited to the meeting, that is already indicative of people wanting to hear from you and your point of view, and that it's respected and wanted. So one of the things that we talk about is leading from where you are right now today. And a lot of young professionals get confused by that because it's not about title, it's not about being an executive, it's about demonstrating leadership from where you're sitting, whether you're a student, if you're a second-year professional, but wherever you are, even if it's amongst your peers, being able to demonstrate leadership. And we're going to show a little bit of how you can weave that into your interview in a few minutes when we get to the more tactical part of this presentation. I'm going to take one more, and then we're going to move on to that, just in the interest of time. So the one that I would like to focus on probably here is about being open and what that actually really means in an organization. So when we talk about being open, what I really think of that as is being change agile and adapting to new opportunities as they come along, and building trust is part of that. But the other piece of this, if you look on the organization side of the slide, is that we talk about, and you've all heard this before, I would assume, around being open to diversity of thoughts and new ways of thinking and doing. Part of being in an organization and being open is also letting go of behaviors, and it could be behaviors, it could be processes, it could be aspects of the job that are actually no longer serving the team or the organization. And so as we move through this process, we'll probably also want to talk a little bit in the interview process. When you are talking about experiences and competencies, these kinds of things will come up, and you will want to come back to these kinds of qualities that you're looking at here on the screen in front of you, and be able to demonstrate examples of when you were open to the possibility of doing something a new way or a different way. So these are just little highlights of how you can use pivot in your interview process and even beyond that. And so I'm going to hope that we can make sure you have access to this, because I do think as you're planning, you can come back and weave this into your preparation. Reggie, is there anything that you want to add to this specific slide before we move into the more tactical?
I would say no, because you've really done a good job of capturing this. And again, in the interest of time, we have a lot of material to cover. So thanks, though.
Awesome. It's always good when someone tells you you're doing an okay job, right? So thank you. Okay. So we're going to move to the tactical, guys. And what I would encourage you here is, if you're not taking notes, this is the time to start taking notes. I sat, just for a little bit of background, I sat on the other side of the desk, meaning before I opened the doors to Beacon Lane, I sat in that global corporate recruiting seat for over 20 years, ran a lot of campus recruiting teams and functions. So while things change and there's a lot of new tools and cool ways of doing recruiting that hit the market every year, recruiting is recruiting is recruiting. So there are some things that are foundational and fundamental that don't change. So the stuff that we're telling you today, you'll hear, I think Jamila will probably echo some of what we're saying. So please take the notes, ask the questions, pick our brains. This is for you. So the way that we're going to do these next, go ahead, Reg.
I was going to say, and to that point, just so everyone is aware, Elaine's position brings a lot of experience to the table, and for many years, in particular the IT community, I was a hiring manager. So I had entry-level positions, I had senior-level positions. So going through the resumes and having the interviews, so for both of us, that's something that is at the heart of what we're passionate about, which is also one of the reasons why we're on this call today and becoming a part of the Emma Bowen team. So
yeah,
that was what I wanted to add.
Love it. Thank you. Okay, guys, so before I actually talk about this, I just want to preface it with one thing. The job search process can be overwhelming. It can become fragmented. It can become chaotic. It doesn't need to be that way. And so I'm not saying it's a perfect science, but there is a formula. And that's what we're trying to show you today. I know this is a little bit of like a boot camp version, but I think what we have here is valuable and can and should be able to help you put some organization around your process for what you're all encountering now in this job search phase of your life. So on this screen, you see we have a learning side and an action side. So I'm going to quickly move through the learning side, and then we'll move into, okay, so what does that mean for you? What do you actually need to do now? Your call to action. So from a learning standpoint, let's talk about your resume. Bottom line is, it's your story, and you need to tell it, and you need to showcase yourself, and you need to highlight your accomplishments. We talk about this being your top 10 list moment, and I really mean that. When you think about your top 10, what do these people need to know about you? If I were to look at the top third of your resume, I want it to jump out at me so that I say, wow, I see who Reggie is. I get it. I get a little bit about who this person is on paper, and I want to know more. So one of the things that I think is really important, and people probably don't do this enough, just part of, I think, human behavior, is highlighting your accomplishments. A lot of effort is great, but what gets rewarded and acknowledged is results. So when you get into work and you get into a job, well, actually, I'll give you a different example. You study really hard for a test in school. You might have studied 40 hours, and for whatever reason, you got a 75 or a C or whatever it was. It wasn't the result you had hoped for. The effort is great, but what gets really rewarded is the result. And so the same thing goes to your resume. We want to highlight your achievements and make it very performance focused. So if we shift over to the right, what does that mean for you now? First step, go back and look at your resume, hoping and assuming you already have one, but if you don't, that's okay. You're going to start one immediately if you don't. And one of the first things that you want to focus on is, what is that opening statement? If it's a canned statement, meaning it's something that anyone could have written, that is not special, that is not unique, you might as well leave it off. So we want to think about, what is that statement? And this is where most people struggle in creating their resume, because they really don't know what to say or how to say it. So we give you a few examples on the next slide. That's probably the most challenging part. But I want you to think about that and think about what makes you unique, different, and what does somebody need to know about who you are. That's good. We'll go here and then we'll bounce back up. So if you look on here, you've got a few different examples. We've got two here from students in the same place you are. They're seniors in college. And we've got one that is a 5-year professional. So it tells you who they are. If we look at the first one, it tells you that this student is an event management student, passion for philanthropy and community, seeking other experience or to further educate herself through additional studies, and working in colleges and universities. So I look at this and I get a feel of who she is. If I'm a hiring manager at a university for student affairs, I'm going to be really interested in this person and I want to read more. Next one is a student who's interested in working in having a career in museums. So not my area, I don't know a lot about it, but it really grabs my attention. It's not a long statement, but it's enough to tell me who she is. And then the last one that you see here, I know right off the bat, it's someone who works in human resources. She uses words like trusted advisor, which is what we talk about in the HR corporate world. We use that term a lot. I see here a data-driven, data decisions, and I know big data is a big deal, and that's how we make a lot of decisions in HR. So these kinds of words help really tell me about the person, and it tells me directionally where we're going. Let's bump back up. Yep, right there. So your resume, these things you might know, but if we threw it in here, the next step after looking at what your opening statement is, and I'm going to actually just tell you that sometimes people need to do their opening statement last because it's a little overwhelming, and I don't want you to be stuck. I want you to keep moving one step in front of the other. Otherwise, you can just keep spinning your wheels and end up down a rabbit hole. So you want to organize your resume with headings. You don't need a lot of white space. It doesn't need to be some fancy format. The resume needs to be something that a recruiter who is looking at hundreds and hundreds of resumes can look at and quickly assess and say, yes or no, this is someone we need to keep talking to or not a fit. So there are some heading suggestions here. There are plenty of other ones out there. These are some of the more common ones. And then underneath each of these headings, you're going to start to bullet them. And each of your bullets for the experience-related headings, so like community engagement or internships or volunteer experience, they should all start with a verb, the action. So developed, created, performed, those kinds of words, and make sure that it ends with the result. That's it for me on this slide, unless, Reg, you have anything you want to add.
The only thing I was going to mention is, the very first statement in the learning box. This is your story, tell it. So one of the things that comes to mind for me is, as you go through the resume writing process, and as a writer myself, one of the things that's always been helpful is write what's hot, meaning, as Elaine mentioned, it doesn't have to be a linear process where you go through every single section. The things that come to mind, because you have the opportunity to arrange and rearrange before you get to the finished product. So don't ever feel like, I have to finish this section before I move on to the next one.
Yep, totally agree. Okay, so now we're going to move to the second phase that we have here, and this is around your job search. And this is what I was talking about a little bit earlier, where I said it can get chaotic and confusing, and what we want to do is try to keep you out of the overwhelm, partly from what we're teaching you today, and certainly through your Emma Bowen Foundation network. Everybody's here to support that. So organized and deliberate. Be aware that a job search can typically take anywhere from 3 to 6 months. That's not a hard and fast rule. Some people land it earlier. Some people it take longer. So keep that in mind. It is a 3 to 6 month process. You don't know what is going on inside of an organization. You might apply for a job and the recruiter may have something else going on, or they may be having internal discussions around a reorganization about how they want to hire. You just never know what's going on. So you have to keep in mind that these things take time. Okay, here's the tough one and the real truth. you will get rejected. I would probably say 99.9% sure you will get rejected. And so you need to embrace this early on. Even the most qualified people, smartest people, they get rejected. It's part of the deal. And if you go into it understanding that, it won't hurt as much. It won't derail you as much each time it happens. Sometimes we take it very personal. It depends on how far into the process you've gotten. I'm opening your eyes to that because it does hurt a little bit, right? Any form of rejection hurts, but you have to keep moving through the process and understand that that is just par for the course, especially in a market where there are jobs and it's competitive. It's a competitive landscape. So remember that all you need really is one offer. I'm not saying any offer. It needs to be an offer that you're excited about, but you only need one. So the other piece, and this is something that if you only remember 2 or 3 things, please make this one of them. Never stop applying just because you've already applied to a job and you think you're close to an offer. Too many people lose momentum because they stop. They think, well, I'm 2 rounds in and I think I've got this job. I'm going to hold off and wait. Biggest mistake you can make. You keep going. You be tenacious. You be diligent. You network. You follow up. You keep going. Until that offer is in hand and you've signed the deal, you keep going. So important. And remain open-minded. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment, but just keep going. And the job that you apply for may morph, may look different. We have to stay open-minded. The goal here is to get you employed in a position that is a good starting point for where you want to be 2, 3, 4 jobs beyond now. So what does that mean for you in terms of action? Okay, first thing is that we are going to set up a basic spreadsheet to start tracking your jobs because I want to see you applying to at least 5 jobs per week. I've had people applying to 10 jobs per week, sometimes 2 per week. I would say 5. We don't want you to be a serial applier just for the sake of applying. So I want it to be organized and deliberate. If you just flip for 1 second to the next slide, Michael, if you don't mind. This is what a job tracking spreadsheet might look like. It's very simple. It keeps you organized, but you're going to have the company, the position you apply to, a job link. So wherever you saw this job, if it's on their website, if it's on LinkedIn, you want to keep the link here so that you can reference back to it. Sometimes that job link may no longer be active when you need to go back to it. So sometimes what I also tell people to do, and I don't have it here, but is to also copy and paste the job description into some sort of a document, a Word document, just so that you can go back and reference it if the actual link is no longer live when you need it. The date that you applied to the job, your point of contact if it's available. Sometimes you know exactly who is receiving your resume, so make note of that. Your network, which we'll get to in a moment, and your status, whether you've applied and you're waiting, you've heard back and you have a phone interview, or you've been rejected. We want to always know where that stands. So this is how you keep yourself organized. If we can go back up to the prior slide, please. Okay, so here's the assignment. It works. It takes a little bit of time, but it's not overly strenuous. So if you're starting out, one of the recommendations we have is to go onto LinkedIn or other job boards and find jobs that interest you, but with no limitations. Forget that you're a student graduating. Forget that this is entry level. Just spend a couple hours searching jobs that look really cool to you, interesting to you, something that you could say, wow, I'd love to be that. That might be a person who's been working for 10 years. That's okay. I want you to connect emotionally with a job that you, for whatever reason, can see yourself aspiring towards, even though you're sitting where you're sitting today. When you do that, I want you to then study at least 5 people who are actually doing that job today. And the way you study them is you get on LinkedIn and you find people who are doing that kind of a job, or you use your network. And what you're actually going to focus on is what did that person do 1 to 3 jobs prior to what they're doing right now. Because what you need to see in this process is sometimes getting there requires taking jobs that you probably may not realize are stepping stones to that job that you really, really want. So I think it's really important for you to look at what their trajectory has been. They didn't land there coming out of school, most likely. They had to do something else. So I want you to really study that and understand What was that job they got out of school? Were they working in the mailroom? Were they the copywriter? Who were they? What were they doing before they got that job that you think is so cool that you want? Once you do that, it's time to be, well, in parallel to this, you're growing your network. You're looking at those people, and you're looking at the groups that they are affiliated with on LinkedIn. LinkedIn has changed our lives in recruiting. So, and it's not the only one. There's plenty of other ones out there. I'm just using that one because it's the most known, probably for this group. Start joining those groups. There's no one saying that you can't join just because you're not 10, 15 years into your career. Start joining those groups, the groups that they belong to, and we'll talk about networking in a minute. And then you're actually going to start applying to jobs. There's two ways you're going to be applying. One is you're going to be on these job boards. You're going to be looking, whether it's on LinkedIn or Indeed or whatever the job boards are that you're drawn to, you're going to look at open jobs. The other way you're going to do this is to look at the companies that you're already drawn to, attracted to for some reason. You're going to go onto their company websites. You're going to look to see if there are open jobs or what we call open requisitions. It's always easier to qualify for a job that they're already looking to fill, which would be an open requisition. So you're going to look at it from both angles. That's it for me on this slide. Reggie, anything to add?
No, ma'am.
Okay, then we're going to go to networking, and I'm actually going to turn this over to Reggie.
And Elaine and Reggie, just, this is really useful stuff. Just want to make sure that we're mindful of time. Yep. I think we're hoping to toss it over to Jamila and then get to Rich as well. So maybe, if we can move to them around 5:10 or so, that would be great.
We definitely can.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So and thanks for that. So just to be brief, we've heard networking before, right? You'll hear networking again. The most important thing to remember about networking is it's something that you've already been doing. You've been doing it since you've known people. It's just a matter of you connecting. So one of the things that you really want to understand about networking, and if you could forward the slide, Michael, please. So we see a pool party here, right? And you see an actual, what you would consider a networking event. Both of these are networking. Both of these are networking. So that's the one thing we want you to understand. You don't have to have a name tag and go to an event. It's anywhere you are as long as you're connecting. So let's move to the next slide.
Okay, last segment of this tactical approach is the interview, the actual interview. It's a dialogue, guys. It's a conversation. So this isn't all about them assessing you. You are assessing them as well. Sometimes it's 50-50. The conversation is 50% driven by them, 50% driven by you. Sometimes it's 60-40, but I think of it as a dance. You need to be in the conversation. The reality is that if you're sitting there and they have a job open, they want you to be a fit. The recruiter doesn't want to spend all their time interviewing people who are not a fit for the job. You're actually potentially solving a problem that they have, so they want you to be a fit. The rest of the stuff here is good to know, not must know, so interview formats can vary. Again, it's all about being prepared. So let's move on to the next slide in the interest of time. Action. Do your homework. I know it's not the first time you've heard this. I've looked at other Emma Bowen presentations. It's so important. You have to do your homework. You have to know who the company is. Maybe they're going through something significant, change, an acquisition, something cool is happening in the industry and their companies have impacted. You need to know those things going in so that you can have a very specific targeted conversation. Know your why. Why do you want this job? Why should they hire you? What makes it different for you? And really, what is this a stepping stone for your next job? And being able to articulate that. So really important. This was the only other second thing you took away. This would be what I'd want you to take away. In your preparation, write down 3 things that you want an interviewer to know about you, no matter what. Plan to tell them at least 2 of them. So no matter what the question is that they ask you, you're going into the interview saying, I know I want the interviewer to know these 2 things about me because I know these 2 things are what make me unique and is why they should be really considering me for this position. So no matter what the question they ask you, whatever the situation is, you're going to weave that into your answer. It will calm your nerves a lot because you are focusing on how you want to, the message you want to leave your interviewer with. Really important. So I want you to take that as an action to do after this call. Practice out loud. So important. You cannot practice in your head. It's not the same. So just practice out loud. Stay in the conversation. Questions that you have, let's just flip to the next slide. Questions that you have need to be relevant to the discussion you've had. We've thrown up here a couple of things if you get stuck, but if you're in the conversation, you really want to ask questions that truly are questions that you have. So think about those questions as you're having the conversation of, hey, he or she didn't really answer that. I'm really curious about what else I might want to know around that particular topic. If you get really stuck, there's some little helpful hints here. You can ask about company growth, mobility. One of the best things is, what does success look like for the person in this role? It's a good question. And then I'm not going to go into the STAR model, but when you're giving your examples, many recruiters are taught to look for situation, task, action, result. So what was your situation? What were you tasked with? What did you personally do about it? And the most important piece is, what was the result? What did you achieve what was the outcome? So anything to add to that, Reg? Sorry, we didn't get to do the example, but I want to be respectful of everybody's time.
Nope, you nailed it.
Awesome. So last slide is really, everybody starts somewhere, right? You're interviewing now. Keep this in mind, please. It's not just for this job. It may feel like you're just interviewing because you need to get this first job and you need to start earning and you want to get your experience, but you're really interviewing for the next 2 jobs, 3 jobs. It's the stepping stone. So please be open-minded about that and use what we've taught you today to really be open-minded and think about what that first stepping stone could lead you to. And we're around for questions. We have an email there that we can further share, but we're available to you as a resource as well. Thanks, guys.
Great, thank you, Elaine and Reggie. That was a really insightful presentation. And as I mentioned, we are short on time, so I want to make sure we get to our next 2 speakers. Jamila Daniel is the Director of Human Resources at Crown Media Family Networks, and we have a few slides to share for Jamila. Jamila, are you there with us?
I am here.
Great. Thanks so much, Jamila, for joining us. We're excited.
Great. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to share a little bit of knowledge. You're going to hear a lot of similar themes from what you heard from Elaine and Reggie. You can just forward to the next slide, Michael. So, as Elaine mentioned, network. If I can't stress something enough, I think it's networking. You definitely want your network to be large. Basically, associates, family, friends, professors, basically anyone that you know is a working professional can be part of your network. One of the things about networking is that you need to speak up and share your career interests, ask for help, ask for advice, ask for leads regarding jobs. The more people that are tapped into what you're trying to do with your career, the more assistance you'll have on that path. Another great practical tip is to find a mentor. A mentor can provide you with their network as a start, but also kind of give you some guidance as you navigate the professional landscape. It's definitely a little bit different than school, and it's great to have an advisor and a guide and someone that has been through it. You want to find someone that has the same career interests as you, most likely, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. And part of being a mentee is that you have the responsibility of taking the time to really nurture the relationship, making sure that you have time. And sometimes you have to be a little bit persistent. We know people are very busy nowadays, but most people that want to mentor someone, they're doing it not only to help you, but it also provides an opportunity for professional and leadership development for themselves. So it's a two-way street, and I really, really strongly recommend that if you're able to try to find a mentor. Of course, join professional organizations that are relevant to your field. Stay connected, as Rasan and Michael mentioned, with Emma Bowen and whatever other alumni associations you can find. And you'll find that a lot of professional organizations have student rates that you'd still be able to take advantage of, so don't forget that. I think we can move to the next slide. So this is kind of in line with preparing yourself for that interview. You want to do your research. You want to know the industry, know the companies that you're interviewing with, know the role and how that plays into the bigger picture. With the industry, what's the landscape of the industry? What are the trends, the challenges? by doing your research, this really helps you to have an informed and engaging conversation when you are in the interview phase. With the company, you want to know the history, their mission, their culture, what are some notable accomplishments that you can draw upon. Know the key players. Who are you interviewing with? Who has the division that you might be, working in, and who's the CEO and those major leaders within the company. And I would say LinkedIn is a great place to find that information, and also, of course, you can Google folks. This area, I think, is really important, not only as you look for a job, but once you're in a job, it is important to stay curious and to understand your company, your industry, what's going on, and to really stay current and understand that big picture. So research is critical, not only as you're looking for a job, but once you're employed as well. I think we can move to the next slide. So show what you know. So how are you going to translate your research into knowledge? We really want to demonstrate, everything that you've uncovered during your research. So, for example, here at Crown Media, we're very focused on, the many platforms that people view and consume content. We have 2 networks. So, one of the things we're looking at is how do we exploit and monetize new platforms and avenues of consumption? And that's not only, specific to us here at Crown Media, but that's something that all programmers and even cable providers are struggling with as as media changes. So these are kind of the things that, with your research, that you should be able to discuss, whatever industry or field that you're looking to go into. You should be able to speak to your field of interest. So, how many people are interested in social media? What are the latest trends in social, and how are companies tracking and monetizing their social footprint? These are the types of questions and thoughts and commentary that you should be able to have around, your field of interest. Your research will help you to formulate those informed questions, again, preparing you for the interview, preparing you to have, really valuable and, I think, meaningful conversations that will differentiate you from the other candidates. We can move to the next slide. So for the interview, many of these things Elaine touched upon. You want to be prepared, practice. As she mentioned, practice out loud. Get a friend, a family member to do mock interviews with you, so you kind of have that script in your head of what you want to talk about, what you want to highlight. You want to be confident. That's easier said than done, but preparation definitely helps in that field. You won't feel as nervous because you do feel prepared. Be professional. Of course, your demeanor from the minute you walk into the door, so not just when you walk in with the interviewer, but when you walk into the reception area, you want to make sure that you're being professional. You want to consider your attire, your demeanor, etc. And be yourself. Show your personality. You're considering an organization as much as they are considering you, and so you need to know that this is a place where you will be comfortable being your authentic self. So remember, they're just not looking at you. You are also, considering that organization and determining if it's a good fit for yourself. Next slide. And this, again, goes back to show what you know. So doing that research, asking those engaging questions, ask thoughtful questions. Make sure you have some questions. I think one of the things that when I interview folks, and if I ask if they have any questions at the end, or they don't ask any questions during our conversation, that definitely shows me that they're not trying to think a little bit harder or show a little bit of effort. So I would definitely say try to formulate questions based on your conversation. If not, as Elaine mentioned, have some questions that you can ask that are important, germane to the company, the role, etc. Having no questions, I think most recruiters would say is not a good thing. Ask the right questions. Again, you'll get to know about the organization and the role and the day-to-day, the culture. All of those things come about from having that interactive dialogue. And then follow up, you need to write. I recommend writing a thank you or email note at least within 24 to 48 hours. And you should send a note to every person that you interviewed with. It should be personalized to the conversation that you had with that person. You can cover some positive skills and traits that you'll bring to the job based on your conversation. It needs to be, pretty concise and short. And then, of course, you want to proofread it and make sure that there's no mistakes, grammatical errors, etc. And again, you want to send that to every person that you actually interviewed with. Even phone screens, you can send a follow-up email, or, some folks even do a personalized card. But I think if you implement these tools and these tips, it really will set you apart from the rest of the field. I can tell you, most people come into my office for an interview and they don't know anything about the organization, not even basic stuff that you can find on the internet. So these are tips and practical tools that I think Elaine and Reggie shared, and also these that will really help set you apart from the rest. And that's pretty much it.
Thank you so much, Jamila. That was fantastic, and I think really supplemented what Elaine and Reggie had gone into really well. For those of you who don't know Jamila, she's been at Crown Media for a while. She's been involved with our organization for a while. She participated in our Link mentoring program back in 2015, and Crown's been a huge supporter of the Emma Bowen Foundation for more than a decade. So thank you, Jamila. And that takes us to Richard. Richard Monaster. She is the Vice President of Talent Acquisition at CBS Corporation. CBS is another huge and longtime supporter of the Emma Bowen Foundation. Really pleased to have Richard join us as well. Richard doesn't have any slides in particular. He's going to kind of riff and tell you guys what he's learned in his many decades of experience in the industry. And this is also a great time for you all to start submitting questions. So if you have any questions, use the question box, and we'll keep an eye on them and share them with our speakers when the time is right. Richard, are you there with us?
Yeah, I am. Yes, thank you. So the first thing I would say to you is to, unlike me, make sure you come prepared. Bring a slide, bring your resume with you on an interview, things like that. But I think the advice today was very good. I just took some notes. I want to just touch on some things that I heard. Again, all great advice, just maybe to go a little bit deeper. So the first thing that I want to bring up is from the very beginning. What I often find from people who are just graduating school when they're talking to somebody about the job they want, they're often, in many cases, very specific, in meaning I only will take this job. I want to be in production. I want to be in film. I want to be in sports. And what Elaine was mentioning earlier, you're not interviewing for this job as much as you are for the one or two jobs after this. Your first job is the most difficult one, and then once you get it, you could always maneuver around larger companies and or show your value. So be very careful, but also know what you want to say with flexibility. So yes, of course, if you've done 3 internships in production, and that's specifically only where you'll be, then you're going to obviously want to make sure that you are able to articulate that. But be prepared to change. I have a degree in biology. I was a pharmaceutical sales rep when I graduated college. So, clearly I have taken a different path, and one that I probably never would have expected to be. So be prepared with what, most people also call your elevator speech, because everyone is networking, and we all get calls regularly, and most of people who do this for a profession is always very happy to do what they can to try to help somebody, but the time is limited. So if you get time in front of somebody, be prepared to articulate what they can do for you, what it is that they can be looking for you. So if I meet you and you say, hey, what I could use some help in is I am looking for, and you try to be able to articulate that in a very short amount of time, but be very, very flexible, but also be as specific as you can. A couple of things about the interview is I agree with Elaine on the going with certain questions, and I think you need to ask yourself what those things would be. But one of the things that I think that is important in an interview is listening. Which is true of anything, but what you'll often see is somebody who's interviewing you, they're asking you some specific questions. They're trying to find out whether you have the skills and or you may be the right person for the job. Those are keys to some things that may be important, where if you answer that question, you could then also turn around and ask a very good question back. So it becomes that conversation that Elaine was mentioning. I do agree you should go prepared, but I think you also need to be very, very relaxed in that you can then become flexible enough to follow the interviewer's lead, to be able to listen to what they're looking for and then turn it around with what your strengths are and why you are in fact the right person for that job. I do agree you should be going in with questions. You should read an annual report before you go into an interview. I don't care what the job is. You should know what the company finances are. You should know what the company manufactures or produces as much as you could possibly can know, because when you're in that meeting, if you do have that opportunity to say something like, oh yeah, I saw that you were just merging with a smaller company that's in the internet space, why was that particularly interesting for that division of yours? That's, you know, not necessarily something that you always need to know, but it's an impressive question that will let people know that you've done some homework in a lot more than what the typical person might do. You know, everyone goes in LinkedIn and everyone goes and does some social media, but the more you know, the more financials you know, the more intelligent you might be able to pull something out while you're having a conversation. One of the other things is you may interview with more than one person. So we in CBS have a division that has 4, 5, 6 people interview one person, which is insane, and we're trying to change that. But what I will recommend you do is remember that every interview is your first interview. And ask the same exact questions if necessary, because you want to have the same conversations. Don't get fatigued. But remember, just because you ask the first person a question, when the fourth person says, do you have any questions, the answer isn't no, I got everything. The answer is, oh yes, and you, one, take some of the information you've learned from the other interviews, so you use it to your advantage to make it sound like you're even smarter than you may be, and you ask questions that you've already asked, because you're going to treat every interview as a first interview. I think that's very important. It's not uncommon to hear hiring managers say, the first one says, oh, I love the person, and the third one says, you kidding me, they were like asleep. So be very careful when you have multiple interviews at one time. The other thing is, if you'll excuse my analogy, but an interview is like a date. And you want to always let the person know who you've just had that date with that it was great. Even if it wasn't, you want to walk away letting them think that you were happy, that you can do the job. So it's always important. You're a salesperson in an interview. Have them sign the document. Thank you very much for the interview. Is there anything else that I can answer for you? I want to make sure that I have everything, I articulated everything that would be helpful for you to see that I'm the right candidate for the job, because I am that interested in it. And most importantly, now I heard more of it, I am sure that I can do the job, and I hope to see if we can't move to the next step. If you see 6 people, say that 6 times again, but you should always make sure that you end the interview letting them know that. I have interviewed people who I loved, and they walk out of my office, and I sit there sometimes and wondering, were they interested? And those are things you don't want to leave. People who, I know that Elaine mentioned that recruiters look for people who are qualified because it helps them, but I don't know if you guys, Elaine or Reggie or whomever, you know, whether you would agree with this statement, but I think that hiring managers in general often look for the red flags of why not to hire. So you want to make sure that you don't give them any of those reasons and eliminate every red flag as possible. Send those thank you letters out, but if my recommendation is you send them different ones. Often one hiring manager will send a letter to the next, and if you know, I have seen where somebody sends the exact same letter to 5 people, and it kind of backfires in the sense that they all say, gee, they didn't take time enough to write something a little bit more personal. And you could technically, I guess, and I would question whether Elaine or you guys agree, you could send one to the group, but I would always recommend individuals. The other thing is, in the interview, listen to something in some of the dialogue. If the hiring manager or the recruiter brings up something that might be interesting and you're having a conversation, send that thank you email afterwards, quickly afterwards. But a day or 2 or 3 days later, let's say it was something about an article or something that was going on in the world, and you could get something from the net that might be interesting, send a follow-up email with a little link saying, hey, I was thinking about our conversation. You mentioned, you mentioned that you love the Yankees, and there was an article in the sports section about a CC pitching beautifully yesterday. Maybe you send something as a follow-up just to keep your face and your name in front of them, and as a follow-up to let them know that you were listening and you did hear what you were talking about, and probably not a sports-related article, but I was just using that as a basic example. Other than that, I think everyone was great, and you got enough information. And from where I'm at right now, anything else, I'm happy to answer questions.
That was great. Thank you so much, Richard.
Great.
Really useful advice to kind of close out this webinar. I know Rasan, our students who are on the call, have probably heard Rasan tell the story about, you referred to her flexibility. Rasan always tells the story about how he interned at Johnson & Johnson, and he had no idea how he would end up, or that he would end up here, 20 plus years from now. So being flexible, I think, is something we all learn down the line that is really, really important, especially as you're getting started. Don't be rigid in your thinking. Definitely go in with the idea you might have, end up in a few different places.
These are all gems and jewels. Thank you so much, Richard and Jamila, and all of the advice that Elaine and Reggie gave was invaluable. So I hope you took notes, and I hope we don't have time for questions, but we certainly have emails. If you want emails, you should contact Michael or myself, and we can forward the emails to you so you can ask additional questions if you have.
Yeah.
But I certainly think you should take the lead here with Richard and Jamila, since they both are at media companies. You should be on their websites after this call to see if there's any opportunity.
Yes. Thanks again to everyone, and Richard, Jamila, Elaine, Reggie. That was really useful advice, and we really appreciate you all taking the time. And those of you who are on the call, I hope you learned something, and hope you'll be following up and certainly keeping in touch with us and keeping us abreast of your job search. We will be sharing the recording of this with you all and anyone who wasn't able to join, and we'll share the slides as well. So thanks again to our speakers. We really appreciate it. We're right up at 5:30. So everybody, hope you enjoy the rest of the day. It's a beautiful day here in New York, so we're going to go do that.
Yes, right.
And thanks again, everyone. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.
Be well, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care, folks.